It had a big billing. Yes, it was Rachel Reeves' spending review. Much speculation. A packed House of Commons. And Rachel Reeves, a heavily scripted, I have to say, Rachel Reeves, telling us just how well everything was going in the country. Let's have a listen.
Mr. Speaker, every day it becomes clearer. It is Labour, and only Labour, that has a credible plan for the renewal of Britain.
Well, I've no doubt you're all feeling renewed at home after nearly a year of this Labour government. Now, responding on behalf of the Conservatives, the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, made one or two quite strong points. He made them rather well, actually.
This spending review is not worth the paper that it is written on. Because the Chancellor has completely lost control. This is the spend now, tax later review. Because the Right Honourable Lady knows she will need to come back here in the autumn with yet more taxes. And a cruel summer of speculation awaits. How can we possibly take this Chancellor seriously after the chaos of the last 12 months?
Well, it's funny how each side throws that word chaos at each other. I think they're both fairly guilty of that. What did I see today? I saw massive promises for huge increases in health spending, proposed cuts in various departments, which may or may not happen, big promises on a reduction of what we'd have to spend on illegal people crossing the channel claiming asylum. But really, overall, I didn't see an awful lot today. What I do think is here's a government whose spending is out of control. And I think, personally, inevitably, taxes, indeed the tax burden, will have to rise when it comes to the budget in the autumn. That's my view. Love to know what you think. Does this mean taxes rise? Tweet #Farage on GB News or email farage@gbnews.com. But somebody who knows far more about these issues than I do by a country mile is, of course, Liam Halligan, economist, Telegraph, Sunday Telegraph economist and Planet Normal podcast host. Liam, was it the big, great event we were expecting?
It was a nothing burger, Nigel, in my view. It was pure political theatre. It was, if I may say so, on a family show, it was like a Rachel Reeves wet dream because she was able to make all these kind of spending pledges, much to the delectation of the Labour left, without saying how she was going to pay for them. But, of course, financial markets were watching, serious people were watching.
And, by the way, no mention at any time of financial markets.
No, which was astonishing given where we are. Let's just... You know, GB News viewers know me, hopefully, for explaining complicated things in a simple way. So let me just try and explain this. Back in October 2022, at the peak of that Liz Truss mini-budget crisis, you and I covered it in great detail here on GB News, the gilt yield, the amount of money the government must pay to borrow, was about 4.6% at its peak, at its peak. Panic, the BBC going into, complete meltdown about the end of the world. That yield, the government borrowing costs, the amount of the markets charge the government, which is all to do with how credible they think the plans are. It's been way above that peak for months. It's been way above 5% for 30-year money. She should have reassured the financial markets. She should have said how she's going to rein in public sector spending, or at least slow down the rate of increase, not least because the one big saving she hopes to make, or again, a slowdown in the rate of increase of spending on welfare, that's been completely reversed before it was even implemented. Yeah. So here you have financial markets, they're looking and they're waiting. The numbers don't add up at all, and that's why, just as Labour did last summer, after they got into office in July, we then had to wait till October for a budget when they just said, oh, it's terrible, there are black holes everywhere, the Tories have left us this complete mess. Everyone thought taxes would go up over the summer, investment therefore stone dead. Yeah. She's just put the economy in irons for the whole of the summer. I thought Mel Stride did do well. I don't think you're being overly generous there. It is now a long, cruel summer of wondering where the tax axe is going to fall as Reeves tries to make it.
And that affects employers.
Indeed.
And we saw the employment figures yesterday, disastrously down. But interestingly, vacancies down as well. which means people aren't even advertising for jobs.
That's right. I mean, I know from my business activities, being on the boards of various entities, hiring has stopped because people are really worried about the cost of hiring with the employer NIC rise.
Yep.
You can't pick up those little part-time jobs in hospitality you used to be able to, because the threshold for NIC contributions from employers has come down from 12 grand to simply 5 grand. That's even affecting students who are trying to
You're working in a bar for
trying to get jobs. Inflation-busting increases in the minimum wage, again, particularly for younger people, and that's before what's called the Employment Rights Bill. Now, we all want employees to have decent rights, but Labour's Employment Rights Bill, going through the Lords as we speak, it takes us back to the 70s, Nigel.
Well, isn't the problem?
It takes us back to too much trade union power.
What I'm struck by with employment rights is if you're a company with 5,000 employees, you can probably manage with the new law that comes in.
Because you've got a compliance department.
But if you're a small company with 5 employees, exactly the same rules apply. And they don't seem to understand
They don't understand that because there's no one on the front bench with any business experience whatsoever. Your party, you've got business experience, Richard Tice has business experience, Zia Youssef has business experience, and all the rest of it. The Tories, in fairness, Andrew Griffiths has business experience, the Shadow Business Secretary, Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, Kemi Badenoch herself. You've all been in business. Many of you have employed people. No one on the front bench of Labour has employed anyone.
Truly extraordinary.
And no one has got any serious knowledge of financial markets and how they might react. And that's really, really worrying.
No,
You're right, it is the small businesses. They are the people that run Britain and make the economy work.
I kind of feel that Parliament doesn't even know who these 5.5 million people are.
That's right.
The black hole, the 22 billion pound black hole, and there we are. It was Keir Starmer was doing it again at PMQs. Isn't the truth, with all the projections we got in the October budget, there's already a Labour black hole?
Firstly, the Tory black hole, it's complete fiction, it's nonsense. Even Paul Johnson, who's probably the most respected fiscal economist in this country, he runs an institution called the IFS. It's like a sort of broadly neutral watchdog, no friend of the Tories or certainly of reform.
No.
He said this black hole, it was obvious to anyone who dared look. It was Labour's excuse for increasing taxes, tax rises that weren't in their manifesto. Since then, yes, of course, Rachel Reeves has made growth assumptions and implemented spending, and the tax revenues are falling short of her projections. She raised capital gains tax by 4%. Guess what? Less capital gains tax revenue.
We've seen that already.
Why do you think that is? The fact that she's tried to get more VAT on school fees. Well, kids going to private schools have fallen dramatically. Less tax revenue. So under many headings, she's getting a lot less tax revenue than she thought she would. During the summer, Nigel, we're going to get from HMRC interim figures of half-year tax receipts, and they're going to be ghastly, and that is going to set the hairs running in terms of where the taxes are going to come in October. So no more investment and a lot less hiring.
Projected borrowing for this year is 150 billion. Almost exactly the same number as the 2008 bailout. Now, I know there's been a bit of inflation since, but it is a gigantic number. They're borrowing far more than their projections. Growth is, let's face it, dismal. Unemployment's rising quite rapidly. Seems to me that come October, they have no choice but to increase the tax burden.
I think that's true. You and I both love this country. We'll be accused of talking down the country. I think GB News viewers and listeners would prefer we told them what's actually happening. Nothing that you've said there is alarmist at all. In fact, it's quite a sanguine analysis of what's happening, and it's factually completely correct, if I may say so. My concern is that Labour is doing things that are ideological rather than things that are rational. Faced with a problem in the fiscal accounts, faced with a gap in the public finances, Rachel Reeves, every instinct in her body will tell her to just keep jacking up taxes. We're now at the point, Nigel, where the more you put up tax rates, I think the less tax revenue you're going to get, because you will just kill activity.
Plus, we have the exodus.
And
now, the last time we saw figures, it showed that 10,800 very rich people had left the country. Those figures have not yet been updated. From what I'm hearing, the next year could be 20,000, 25,000.
And you know the statistic, it's an incredible number. The top 1% of earners pay 30% of income tax. And of course, a lot of the people we're talking about who are leaving are those top 1%. And then there's another kind of 10th of 1% people who don't earn income, they earn dividends and wealth, and they also account for a massive slug of taxation. If you send those people packing gleefully, as Labour are with their sort of sixth form politics, bye-bye rich people, you are going to have massive problems making the sums add up.
How pessimistic are you?
I'm generally an optimistic person.
No, I
generally believe in the genius of British people and the resilience of British people. But even the great entrepreneurs of this country, the alarm clock classes, the hard-working families that we have, that we're blessed to have, even they can't keep going when they've got their hands tied behind their backs and their ankles manacled. And that is what's happening under this government. It's a war on the private sector that we're seeing. That's what really worries me.
Well, they've carried all the costs, haven't they?
They have.
Of literally everything.
The public sector protected at all times.
So, I mean, I was always sceptical about this idea that she was 10 years an economist at the Bank of England. My colleague Lee Anderson called her Rachel from accounts, which was quite funny.
That's stuck, isn't it?
Yeah, that's probably more accurately Rachel from complaints. Is it reasonable and fair? I'm trying to be as objective about this as I can. She's hopelessly out of her depth, isn't she?
I think she's out of her depth because she is driven above all by ideology and party politics. She's absolutely petrified she's going to be removed from her post. She's got, the Red Queen, Big Ange.
Yeah, who is so left-wing on tax.
Unbelievable. And she is the person behind this employment rights bill. Again, I don't begrudge people rights at work,
earning good money and having rights.
People would rather be employed, and this is just going to kill a lot of employment stone dead. And even Starmer himself, after Big Ange, deftly leaked her memo about all these tax rises that she wanted, exciting, enticing the Labour backbenches, then Keir Starmer himself immedately moved to not make the savings on welfare that Labour had committed to.
Yeah.
What do you think financial markets think of that?
Well,
they think, well, these people they're not serious people. They obviously can't read balance sheets. They obviously think this is all about student politics rather than mathematics and making the sums add up. I am generally optimistic about this country, but I do worry that Labour is killing enterprise and entrepreneurship stone dead.
Final last question. Completely unfair one.
Go on.
How long does she last?
Well, I think politics of her own party may oust her relatively soon. Maybe they'll keep her there so she can take the heat for the tax rises
in the budget this autumn.
Yeah, and then get rid of her for somebody who, strap yourself in, Nigel, is even more left-wing.
Liam, absolute pleasure to have you here again on the programme with me. Well, there we are. That was a pretty bearish analysis from the ever-genial, optimistic Liam Halligan. Gosh, if he's getting depressed, things must be really rotten.